Hey there! Welcome to the third episode of Open Floor. This episode is an update to episode 1 on police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movements. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our new co-host Aryan and I to the podcast.
Thanks, Ali. I'm really excited to join you on Open Floor and work with you on future podcast episodes.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Now, before we begin, I'd like to ask you to please follow us on wherever you get your podcasts, like Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts. Check us out on our website at openfloor.me/home, and also follow us on Instagram at openfloorpodcast. Now, in the first part of our segment on police brutality, one of the final questions that was asked of the interviewees was, what changes do you want to see in response to the protests?
Recently, changes have indeed occurred in Minneapolis, the city in which this wave of protest was sparked by the killing of George Floyd. A veto-proof majority, which consisted of 9 out of the 12 members of the Minneapolis City Council, pledged to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, saying that the existing system could not be reformed. Though a specific plan for the future of public safety was not released by the council, they did pledge to work with the community to develop new plans. Current proposals have focused on prohibiting the employment of officers that are not from Minneapolis, restricting the use of military gear by the police, diverting money from the police to social welfare programs like those focused on improving housing and mental health, and not sending armed officers to situations that do not require weapons. 5 of the 12 members of the Minneapolis City Council say that they will introduce a formal proposal later this month, June, that would remove the requirement that Minneapolis maintain a police department. If this proposal were to make it onto the ballot in this November, Minneapolis voters would have to approve the change before it would come into effect. Council members see this as an important first change in bringing about sweeping reform to the police department.
Now, on a broader scale, Democrats in Minnesota take the chance of the protests happening to propose laws to change how police can act in situations of conflict. This includes banning chokeholds, as they want to bring down the amount of police-induced deadly force actions that happen in their state every year. Other proposed bills include restoring the right to vote to 50,000 felons coming out of Minnesota prisons and putting the Attorney General in charge of prosecuting officer-involved shootings. Many of these proposed laws are being taken up in other states, such as New York, and are planned to be passed in the near future.
Political changes are also sweeping the country as a whole. Police budget cuts are being proposed in cities across the country. For example, the mayor of Los Angeles proposed cutting $150 million of funding from the LA Police Department. The New York City councilors proposed cuts of 5 to 7% of the New York Police Department, and the mayors of Boston, Lansing, and Seattle are considering similar measures. Additionally, monuments that have been dedicated to purportedly racist historical figures are being removed. For example, Boston is removing a statue of the colonist Christopher Columbus. Buildings and streets in the southern United States that were dedicated to Confederate figures are being renamed, and the use of the Confederate flag is now illegal in the U.S. Marine Corps. Furthermore, law enforcement agencies and politicians are enacting changes that are focused on curbing police violence, including banning neck holds, making it mandatory for officers to report misconduct, and making it required for police officers to approve no-knock home search warrants, banning the concealment of police officer badge numbers, and restricting the use of tear gas on protesters. Also, in reforms that have been seen as extremely promising in efforts to curb police brutality, legislation was introduced into U.S. Congress that would increase independent oversight of police departments, increasing the accountability for officers. Another bill seeks to reverse the qualified immunity doctrine, which shielded police from legal liability and would allow civil lawsuits to be filed against the police.
Now, even more things are happening countrywide with regards to businesses, and I want to blast through just a few of them that stand out. Starbucks begins to allow its employees, starting June 12th, to wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts while on the job. Music streaming service Spotify makes Juneteenth, which is a day commemorating the emancipation of slaves in the United States, a paid holiday for all U.S. employees. Amazon barred the police from using their new facial recognition software called Recognition with a K for 1 year, as it is less capable of identifying people with darker skin tones. Bank of America said on June 2nd that they would invest $1 billion over the course of 4 years to address racial and economic inequalities that are present all over the United States. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian resigned and requested that his spot be filled by a black person. They instated Michael Sable, an American entrepreneur and CEO, to take his spot, honoring his request. NASCAR eliminates the use of the Confederate flag and the use of it at races. And finally, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell makes a public statement apologizing for not recognizing the complaints of the African American players for years, including Colin Kaepernick. Now, all of these not only show the changes that are happening on business sides of things, but also on the political sides.
However, some of these movements for change are being met with a significant degree of skepticism, including the movement with the tagline, "Defund the Police." The slogan is not meant to be taken completely literally, as per its proponents. The true meaning of defunding the police isn't one that is immediately evident on the surface of the term. Instead of calling to stop the police from receiving funding, as the term may seem to say, supporters of the tagline instead wish for government money that is currently allocated to the police to be moved to other parts of local government, like schools, healthcare, and housing. These measures would seek to reduce the severity of the risk factors for crime, such as poor education, homelessness, and mental illness, and also call for unarmed professionals like social workers and medics to respond to some 911 calls that don't require armed police officers. However, the slogan is one that has created much confusion across the country. When directly asking poll respondents if they'd supported defunding the police, just 27% said that they did in a recent YouGov poll. However, when a survey by Perry Undum framed the question slightly differently and asked whether those surveyed supported redirecting money from police departments to pay for mental health experts, 72% said yes. 70% said that they would support having taxpayer dollars reallocated to pay for a healthcare professional to go to a medical emergency instead of an armed police officer. And 66% said that they supported reallocation of funds to pay for a social worker to respond to a call about a homeless person who was loitering instead of an armed police officer. 61% of respondents supported an option in which police could focus on crimes like burglary and murder, and other service providers could focus on emergency calls about addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. Many Democrats, including presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, are distancing themselves from the slogan "Defund the Police," as many voters see the slogan as a move to make change that could be too radical. Republican President Donald Trump has utilized the slogan as an opportunity to condemn the Democratic Party for being far too radical.
Now, even more specifically, the Lexington, Massachusetts Town Meeting Committee recently approved funding to expand the police shooting range for the town. Residents have begun to create petitions to deny the funding here, and protests are happening in the city to defund the police. Now, all of these changes are really crucial to take note of, as it shows the progress that the movements are making. However, it seems that some actions keep occurring over and over again. This is evident through the recent killing of Rayshard Brooks. Rayshard Brooks was an African-American man who was asleep in his car in a Wendy's drive-thru in Atlanta, Georgia. Police found him and asked him to step out of his vehicle to have him complete a sobriety test. After a while of struggling, Brooks took one of the officer's tasers and ran away. Now, not much after, he turned around and discharged the taser, only then to be shot twice in the back by one of the chasing officers and killed. The day after the killing of Rayshard Brooks, hundreds of residents filed onto the highway next to the Wendy's to peacefully protest. However, there were a number of violent protesters who threw Molotov cocktails into the Wendy's, sending it up in flames. This was the stupidest thing that could have happened, as the Wendy's was about 10 feet away from a gas station, and who knows, if the fire had reached the gas station, what destruction it could have created.
Following the shooting of Rayshard Brooks, which ended fatally, the Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields resigned from her position and was widely been deemed as an unnecessary use of force by a police officer when responding to a potentially criminal situation.
Now with this, we conclude the third episode of Open Floor. Although this was a shorter episode than previous episodes, we hope that this week's episode was informative to you and helps you to get a bigger picture of current events around the country in these changing times.
If you would like to view the sources that we used for this episode of Open Floor, you can find them either linked in the description or at openfloor.me/sources.
I want to thank our wonderful producer, Amin Purgol Mohammed, for producing this episode. Please visit our website in the description to sign up for email updates on new episodes. We hope you'll tune in next time, where we plan on discussing a few important political issues that are present in today's America. I'm Ali Musallai.
And I am Aryan and I.
And until next time, thanks for listening to Open Floor.